What kind of woman walks 10 miles under the burning New Mexico sun just to answer a stranger's notice for a ranch cook? That was the question that hit Colter Vane the moment he saw her. The day had started like any other in August 1889. The sun hung high in a cloudless sky, turning the ground to powder and the air to fire. Jacob McAllister had ridden into Murphy's General Store at exactly noon and hammered up the notice Colter told him to write. Ranch cook needed. Room, board, fair wages. Inquire at Double V Ranch, 10 miles north. Colter didn't expect anyone to answer, not with the ranch's reputation for being a hard place under a hard man. 2 winters had passed since Martha died, and the once warm ranch house had turned silent and cold. Colter grew even quieter than before, his grief settling over him like desert dust. His hands worked hard, but his heart stayed locked away. Even the men whispered that the Double V had become a place where food burned, tempers burned faster, and nothing felt right anymore. That afternoon, Colter stood in the heat staring across the shimmering land when his foreman Tom Briggs came out from the barn with 2 saddled horses. "You plannin' to stand there all day?" Tom asked. "Fence line ain't gonna mend itself." Colter barely moved. "Notice should be posted by now." Tom snorted. "Optimistic of you thinking anyone's gonna work for a bear with a sore head." Colter didn't argue. He knew exactly what he'd become. They had barely ridden a mile from the ranch when Tom slowed his horse. "Now that's a sight," he muttered. Up the dusty road came a mule-driven cart piled high with belongings. A woman walked beside it, 3 children perched on top. Even from a distance, her posture struck Colter. Straight, steady, determined. No fear, no hesitation, just forward. As they approached, more details grew clear. The woman wore a faded blue dress, carefully mended. A sunbonnet shadowed her face. Her children watched the riders with wide, serious eyes. The oldest boy, maybe 12, put his arm protectively around the smaller boy. The little girl clutched a cloth doll so tightly her knuckles were white. The woman stopped, resting a hand on the cart. Not reaching for a weapon, but ready if needed. Smart. Careful. A survivor. Tom tipped his hat. "Ma'am, everything all right? Long way from anywhere." She pushed back her bonnet. Green eyes met Colter's. Eyes that had seen hardship, but had not broken. There was something in that gaze that made his breath catch. "We're quite well," she said, her voice carrying a hint of Virginia softness, worn down by years of struggle. "We're looking for the Double V Ranch." Colter spoke before Tom could. "I'm Colter Vane. I own the Double V. What's your business?" Quote. She straightened, chin up, shoulders square. "Margaret Hartley. People call me Maggie. I've come about the position." Colter blinked. "Position?" Quote. "For a cook. You posted for one." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "That notice went up an hour ago." "Yes," she said simply. "We started walking immediately." "You walked 10 miles in this heat with 3 children to apply for a cook position?" Quote. "I did. Is that a problem?" Quote. There were a dozen reasons to turn her away. A widow. He recognized the black ribbon on her sleeve. 3 children. A ranch full of men. Gossip. Judgment. Trouble. But something about the way she stood there, steady as a fence post in a storm, forced him to look a second time. "Can you cook?" he asked. "I can. I ran a boarding house kitchen in Denver for 2 years, 25 boarders, 3 meals a day. I managed until—" her voice softened. "Until it burned down." The older boy stepped forward. "Mama's the best cook in Colorado or New Mexico." "James," she warned gently. But Colter caught the hint of a smile, one that tugged something inside him he thought had died with Martha. "What happened to your husband?" Colter asked bluntly. It was necessary to know. "Wagon accident, 6 months ago." Tom looked away, uncomfortable. Colter should have sent her on her way. It would have been the smart thing, the proper thing. But the sight of those silent children, dusty but brave, stirred something in him he had not felt in years. "The job includes a cabin behind the main house," he said. "It's old but solid, meals with the hands. Children, too." Quote. Hope flickered in her eyes, then steadied. "And wages?" Quote. $30 a month, plus room and board. She nodded once. When do you need me to start? Quote, You're hired. Tom almost choked. You're joking. Coulter ignored him. Tomorrow morning, can you make it the rest of the way? Quote, We've come this far, she said simply. They rode ahead so the men could prepare the cabin. Behind them, the woman and her children kept walking, dusty and tired but unbroken. Word spread fast at the ranch. A woman cook. A widow with children. The men stared, whispered, argued. Old Sam shook his head. Ain't no place for children here. But Coulter ended the talk with one sharp order. Get that cabin cleaned out. I want it fit for a family by nightfall. At sunset, Maggie and her children reached the Double V. The ranch hands, pretending not to stare, watched as Maggie helped her children down from the cart. The boys looked toward the barn with excitement. The little girl hid behind her mother. Coulter watched from his window. He meant to go down and greet them, but he didn't move. Something about the sight held him in place. A woman who had walked 10 miles because she refused to give up. A woman who did not flinch. A woman who brought a spark of life to a place that had forgotten what warmth felt like. The cabin lights glowed softly that night. Children's voices carried through the still air. It felt different, lighter, almost hopeful. Coulter stood on his porch listening. For the first time in 2 years, the Double V didn't feel empty. He hired a cook. That was all. Nothing more. And yet, as he lay awake that night, he found himself wondering what kind of woman answered a stranger's notice with nothing but courage, 3 children, and a will made of iron, and why the thought of her made him look forward to morning. What happens when a woman with nothing to lose steps into a kitchen ruled by silence and grief? Maggie Hartley learned the answer before the sun even rose the next morning. At 4:30 a.m., the Double V ranch house was quiet except for the faint creak of old floorboards. Maggie's lamp glowed softly in the kitchen window, the only light awake on the whole ranch. She moved with purpose, her sleeves rolled up, her hair pinned tight, her hands already dusted with flour. The stove was a stubborn beast, but she tamed it quickly. Fire roared to life. Bacon popped in the pan. Biscuit dough rose under her steady touch. 12 hungry ranch hands would sit at this table before long, and this was her first test. Can I help, Mama? James asked, slipping into the room, hair mussed, eyes determined. You can make the coffee, she said. 3 scoops per pot, and 4 pots today. He straightened with pride and got to work. By the time dawn broke, the kitchen smelled like heaven. Bacon, biscuits, fried potatoes, and strong coffee filling every corner. Tom Briggs walked in first. He froze in the doorway like he'd walked into a dream. Ma'am, he said, taking off his hat, if it tastes half as good as it smells, the boys might start worshiping you. Quote, It's a 3-day trial, Maggie reminded him. Trust me, Tom grinned. You're already passing. More. But the real test came when the ranch hands filed in. Their voices dropped. The room went quiet. Rough men, dusty from the bunkhouse, stared at Maggie like they weren't sure whether to sit or run. Breakfast will be on the table in 5 minutes, she said calmly, never stopping her work. You all know where you sit. That cracked the silence. They took their seats. They watched. They waited. Maggie placed platter after platter on the table. Golden biscuits, crisp bacon, eggs scrambled fluffy, potatoes fried with onions, coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Then the miracle happened. Silence. Not awkward silence, but reverent silence. Then, forks scraping plates, coffee being poured, quiet groans of happiness, grins spreading like wildfire. Best breakfast since Martha, Pete blurted. Old Sam nodded. Truth. Maggie didn't glow at the compliment, but her hands moved a little lighter. Then the kitchen door swung open and everyone sat up straighter. Coulter Vane walked in. He sat at the head of the table, looked at the food, looked at the men, then began to eat without a word. Maggie turned back toward the stove when she heard his voice, Mrs. Hartley. Yes, Mr. Vane? The biscuits. What did you do to them? Quote. Her heart dropped. Is something wrong? "They're light." She blinked. "Light? Haven't had a light biscuit in 2 years." Before she could respond, he went back to eating. But Tom shot her a thumbs up from behind him. The meal ended with quiet thank yous from the men, more than she expected. Grace and Henry peeked in after lessons, ready to explore as soon as the kitchen was clean. Maggie allowed a small smile. Maybe, just maybe, they would be okay here. But peace never lasted long in the West. By midday, the trouble she expected finally arrived. She was kneading bread dough when Grace ran in, eyes wide. "Mama, there's a lady outside. She said we shouldn't be here." Maggie wiped her hands and stepped out into the yard. A buggy sat there like a judgment on wheels. A wealthy woman, dressed in fine lace and iron dignity, looked down her nose at Maggie. "You must be the new cook," she said coldly. "I am Mrs. Edward Thornton. My husband owns the bank." "Good afternoon," Maggie said. "I've come to speak plainly. It is improper for an unmarried woman, especially a widow with children, to be living on a ranch full of men. People are already talking." Maggie kept her voice even. "People will talk regardless. Surely you see this is not a suitable environment for your children or your reputation." "My reputation?" Maggie asked quietly. "Mrs. Thornton, were you concerned for us when we had nowhere else to go? When we walked 10 miles in the heat to reach this ranch? When we had no home?" Quote. The woman's lips thinned. "This is about standards." "This is about judgment," Maggie corrected. "Good day, Mrs. Thornton." When the buggy finally rolled away, Maggie's hands trembled, but not from fear, from anger, from exhaustion, from the weight of fighting battles she never asked for. But the day wasn't done testing her. Dinner was a masterpiece: roast beef, gravy, potatoes, green beans, fresh bread, and a small cake she saved for special occasions. When Coulter quietly accepted a second slice of cake, the men exchanged glances. Their new cook wasn't just good, she was exceptional. Later, as Maggie cleaned the kitchen alone, footsteps sounded on the porch. Coulter appeared at the door, looking uncomfortable. "The meal was satisfactory," he said. "Thank you. Mrs. Thornton's opinions don't carry weight here." She looked up sharply. Before she could speak, he walked away. That night, Maggie tucked her children into bed in their small cabin. For the first time since arriving, they laughed freely. They felt safe. And when she stepped outside into the quiet night, she saw Coulter standing on his own porch across the yard. Just standing, watching the lights in her cabin. 2 people, both alone in different ways, both carrying grief that had sharpened instead of softened them. She wondered what kind of man watched over others from the shadows. And Coulter wondered why the sound of laughter drifting from her cabin made the Double V feel alive again. The desert wind moved between them like a whisper of something new, something both had been too afraid to hope for. What does a man do when the woman he's come to care for is suddenly threatened by the past she fought so hard to escape? Coulter Vane learned that answer the hard way. 2 quiet, hopeful weeks passed after Maggie's first day. The Double V felt alive again. The hands joked more. The children laughed in the yard. And some nights Coulter found himself drifting toward Maggie's cabin porch just to hear her voice or catch sight of lamplight glowing through her window. But peace in the West never lasts. The trouble arrived on a dusty Thursday afternoon. Maggie was teaching Grace about weeds in the garden when a rider approached. A man on a black stallion with a polished vest, perfect boots, and a cold smile. The moment Maggie saw his face, the basket of vegetables slipped from her fingers. "William," she whispered, fear draining the color from her face. Her late husband's older brother. Grace tugged her sleeve. "Mama, who is he?" "Go inside," Maggie instructed. "Find your brothers. Stay there." Her voice shook. William dismounted, smiling like he owned the world. "Margaret." "What a surprise. You look worn, but well." Coulter stepped onto the porch the moment he saw Maggie's fear. He walked toward her, placing himself at her side. "Can I help you?" Coulter asked, his voice low and steady. William's eyes flicked over him with smug amusement. "You must be Mr. Vane." "I'm William Hartley, Margaret's brother-in-law. I've come to collect my family." Maggie stiffened. "We are not your family." "Legally," William said smoothly, drawing a folded document from his coat, "I am the guardian of Daniel's children. My brother knew you were impulsive, unstable, so he named me protector of his legacy." Coulter moved closer. "You haven't seen those children in years." William shrugged. "I've been searching for them, and now that I've found them, I'm taking them, especially Margaret. I have a place for her in my home in Chicago." Quote. In that moment, everything snapped into focus for Coulter. William didn't want the children. He wanted control, power, obedience, and Maggie most of all. Tom Briggs and several hands gathered behind them, watching with cold eyes. Old Sam leaned on a post nearby, rifle resting against his leg. William looked around, clearly calculating his odds. "Let's be reasonable," he said smoothly. "We can go to the sheriff in the morning, verify the papers, sort this out like men." Coulter's jaw tightened. "Fine, tomorrow." But Maggie's hands trembled the whole way back to the house. The sheriff examined the papers the next morning and frowned. "These look real. Signed by Daniel Hartley himself." Maggie's breath hitched. Coulter reached for her hand under the table. William smiled like a vulture. "See? I told you." "But," the sheriff continued, "this needs a judge's ruling. Judge Carter's passin', through in 2 weeks." William exploded. "Unacceptable!" "You'll wait," the sheriff said firmly. "Children stay where they are until then." Quote. The ride home was silent until they reached the gate. "Maggie," Coulter said softly, helping her down from the wagon, "I won't let him take you, or the children." Tears welled in her eyes. "You can't fight the law." "I can fight anything. For you," he hesitated. "For all of you." Her breath caught. He meant it. That night, William snooped around the ranch with a predator's patience, and Coulter couldn't sleep. When he finally dozed, it was Maggie's voice that jolted him awake. "Coulter, something's wrong." Shouting erupted outside. A lantern smashed. Hooves thundered. William was running. With Henry, Coulter tore out the door despite his old wound pulling painfully. Maggie screamed for her son. Tom sprinted. James ran. Chaos exploded through the yard. "Henry!" Maggie cried. "Let him go quietly." William snarled, holding the terrified child in front of him. "Or I take him for good and you'll never see him again." "You touch him," Coulter said, stepping forward with a cold calm that shook the air, "and I will bury you myself." William sneered. "A cook and her bastard children? Not worth your life." "They're worth everything," Coulter said. Lightning cracked across the sky as if the heavens agreed. Old Sam fired the warning shot. Pete tackled William from behind. Henry broke free, running straight into Coulter's arms, sobbing. William fled toward the barn, but Tom took him down hard in the mud. When the dust settled, William lay face down, tied and beaten, screaming curses into the dirt. Judge Carter arrived the next day after hearing of the incident. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "William Hartley," he said, "your guardianship petition is denied. Permanently, you are a danger to these children and to their mother." William tried to shout, but the judge silenced him with one glare. As for Mrs. Hartley and Mr. Vane, the judge looked between them, eyes softening. "Some families are formed by choice, not blood. The law will recognize that." He tipped his hat. "Congratulations, Coulter. You've got yourself quite a family." William was escorted out of the territory under guard. He never returned. That evening, Maggie found Coulter on the front porch, sitting quietly, watching the sky. She touched his shoulder. "You saved Henry." "You saved him first," he corrected softly. "You always do." She sat beside him. "What happens now?" He turned, eyes full of something raw and honest. "Now? I ask you the hardest question I've ever had to ask." Her breath held. "Maggie, will you marry me? I love you. I love your children. I want a home with you, a real home." Tears flooded her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Coulter. We're yours, all of us." The children burst from the doorway, cheering before he could even kiss her. Henry threw his arms around Coulter's neck. "So you're our papa now?" he asked, hopeful and small. Coulter's voice broke. "If you'll have me, son." 3 voices shouted, "We will!" And Maggie pulled Coulter into her arms as the sunset wrapped them all in gold. That night, under the quiet New Mexico sky, the Double V Ranch finally became whole again. Not because of the buildings, not because of the land, but because 2 broken hearts chose to build a family in the dust and hope of the West. A new beginning, a safe home, a love strong enough to weather any storm. And so the widow who walked 10 miles to answer a notice found everything she never knew she was searching for: a husband, a father for her children, and a forever home.